Thanks for the privilege to all of you to provide testimony today. I have just returned from a short trip to Kyiv as part of a delegation of 5 former ambassadors, including my co-panelist, Ambassador Bill Taylor, and former Supreme Allied Commander, General Retired Phil Breedlove. Our visit to Ukraine included a private meeting with President Zelensky, as well as with several members of the Ukrainian Rada, ministers, and military officials. President Zelensky is not confused about the threat. He knows it is very real and that the survival of his government and of his country are at stake. He differs with the United States government as to the scale of what a new Russian offensive will look like, but he has no illusions about the threat. President Zelensky's aim is to grow the size of his armed forces by 100,000 soldiers over the next 3 years, and for that, he needs financial resources. He is not asking for any soldiers from any nation. He only asks for the financial resources to build his own army, for weapons and ammunition, and for continued diplomatic and economic support from the West. The threat from Russia is real and it is growing. While a new Russian offensive is not imminent, I fear it is increasingly likely. There is no sign of de-escalation. President Putin appears overconfident. He is applying maximum pressure on the West in this self-manufactured crisis in hopes that Ukraine and or NATO will eventually make concessions. What is at stake? As German Foreign Minister Baerbock recently stated, it is the entire European peace order. Stability and security in the transatlantic area are endangered if Putin can enlarge Russia's territory at will without regard for international law, existing treaties, and borders. A failure of deterrence would further open the door to the Russian way of war with cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, aggression in the air and maritime domains, targeted assassinations, and the weaponization of Russian-controlled energy resources. A new influx of potentially tens of thousands of refugees into Western Europe would have destabilizing effects across Europe, which is one of the Kremlin's intended outcomes of such an attack. I do not believe that a large-scale attack towards Kyiv is likely, as it would generate too many Russian casualties, and it's not actually necessary for them to achieve their strategic aim. Instead, I anticipate that a new offensive will be a continuation of what they are already doing. A new offensive is more likely to be a series of rolling, limited objective operations to, number one, demonstrate that the Kremlin is not deterred by NATO, two, to further weaken the government of Ukraine, and three, to frustrate Western decision makers with actions below some perceived threshold of violence that might make going forward with the most severe sanctions more difficult. This administration deserves credit for leading perhaps the most comprehensive U.S. diplomatic effort I have seen since the 1995 Dayton Peace Accord. Although there are still significant differences among some nations about how to respond, every NATO country has agreed to reject the Kremlin's ridiculous demands. Although recent unhelpful statements by Hungary's Prime Minister Orban and Croatia's president are cracks that the Kremlin will exploit. The administration and NATO have transitioned from passive deterrence to active deterrence, as evidenced by the heightened alert of the NATO response force, today's welcome announcement of U.S. troop deployments to Europe, other nations delivering weapons, and even France's offer to lead a new battle group into Romania. Not all of our allies have been as decisive as they should, Germany foremost among them. But Germany is the key. Most of the European Union will follow Germany's lead on most diplomatic and economic sanctions. Therefore, I am frustrated that Germany, our most important ally, has not yet acted decisively regarding Nord Stream 2. But I do know that the German government has publicly acknowledged at last that Russia is the aggressor and that, quote, everything is on the table as an option for sanctions should Russia attack. These are positive steps, and I believe that leaders within the Green Party are particularly helpful. The Biden administration must continue to work closely with the German government to ensure we remain unified in our assessment of the Russian threat and in our response. Therefore, we need to understand the domestic political challenges facing this new German coalition government and seek alternative sources of gas to mitigate the threat of Russia disrupting gas supplies to Europe, which the administration is now doing. A partnership between Germany and the United States, which ensures a strong, unified effort in all domains, is what will ultimately give the Kremlin the greatest pause. What else can the alliance do to prevent a new Russian offensive against Ukraine? We need to take the initiative instead of always reacting to whatever the Kremlin does. But we have to do this in unity with our allies. We need to realize that this is about so much more than Ukraine. We need a strategy for the greater Black Sea region, and we must repair the damaged relationship with Turkey, which holds the key to the region. In the near term, we should be doing everything possible to enable Ukraine to more effectively defend itself. I'm happy with most of what the administration is already sending. We just need to get it there faster, especially air defense and anti-ship capability. We must be prepared to escalate horizontally to force the Kremlin to look in other directions versus being able to focus fully on its operations in Ukraine, such as threatening the Kerch Strait Bridge and the Russian Navy's illegal base at Sevastopol. We should encourage Turkey to close the Bosphorus and Dardanelles Straits to Russian Navy vessels in accordance with its authority under the Montreux Convention. And we should let it be known that we are seriously prepared to blockade the Russian Navy base at Tartus in Syria. I fully support the administration's plans to enact sanctions targeting President Putin's personal wealth and to remove Russia from SWIFT. We must continue competing in the information domain by countering false Kremlin-backed narratives, such as that NATO is a threat to Russia. Finally, the West should build an off-ramp for President Putin. There are things we can do which will not in any way betray Ukraine, our allies, or any of our values, but could give President Putin an opportunity to draw back his forces. For example, we should double down on exercise transparency and offer to reestablish the mutual military special observer missions which existed during the Cold War. NATO members could make a public joint statement where member states guarantee Russia's internationally recognized borders. We have already done this. In effect, for decades, NATO has been guaranteeing Russia's borders. And on its face, it almost seems ludicrous for Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia to have to guarantee that they would never invade Russia. But maybe because it does seem so ludicrous, making a public event out of it might help counter the false narrative of Russia being threatened by NATO. Of course, the alliance should still keep communication channels open with the Kremlin in every possible format. But we must have a clear-eyed perspective about the nature of diplomacy with the Kremlin. These are not Boy Scouts. They use chemical weapons, poison, and murder against their own opposition. And they use cyber and disinformation to destroy lives and trust in our democratic system. We should talk, but we need to understand with whom we're talking. I look forward to your questions, and thank you again for the privilege of testimony today.